And that cab driver didn't even help him carry all that stuff up the stairs, is what someone said to me recently. And I completely empathise with their particular take on the situation. You know, the cab driver for some reason being vindictive or having a negative approach in his role and not being willing to help the other person. And the person who spoke to me told me this, I guess, was feeling pretty frustrated, perhaps angry, almost perhaps outraged. And at the same time, I wonder to myself, how useful was that state for them? Let's just transpose that. This was a personal, interpersonal thing, but let's just transpose it to something that's more business-like, more in a professional role. And we notice that we judge and evaluate people all the time on the subtlest things, little bits of body language, non-verbal communication, the way they use their voice, or indeed the things they say. And while I get the whole kind of genetic imperative about needing to judge and evaluate, because well, way back at the root of it, our lives could be at risk. Way back when the saber-tooth was wandering the plain, and last time he took 2 or 3 of our children, and we need, when we see him again, to make a quick decision, live or die. What am I going to do? And that kind of instant judgment and evaluation is called for in those kind of situations. But I think most of the time in our day-to-day lives, hopefully, and indeed in our professional lives, we're not in that kind of situation. We're not in that kind of place. So I go back to my question, how useful was that state to the person who told me that story, really? And is there something we can do to quickly move ourselves to a more practical state? Remember, again, in a professional context, a kind of meeting, a negotiation, something like that, or an ongoing professional relationship with a client, or indeed with your line manager or with a member of your team, or indeed, as I've said before, in your personal life. How does it work for you? So here's something that I try, and as I said, with apologies to Eddie Cochran, I call it steps 1, 2, and 3, and it's very simple. It's not really about acquiring the truth. It's about shifting your state quickly to possibly a more productive and useful state where you can connect with the person, the other party, and move forward. It's this, very simply. Step 1, instantly think of another possible reason. I mean, you've got one, you've made your evaluation, your judgment. In this instance, the taxi driver was being purposefully unhelpful. That's one possible explanation. We don't know. What about step 1 then, moving away? Perhaps he was... perhaps he had a bad back. Perhaps he had a bad back and he was unable to help. Then after step 1, you go to step 2. What's another possible explanation? Okay, maybe he was socially, shy, uncomfortable, not forthcoming. Perhaps his command of English wasn't great. So there's another possible explanation. Again, it doesn't matter if it's true or not true. And then step 3, which is, if you've got 2 other possible explanations, when you get to step 3, you usually have to think a little bit too. So step 3, what would the third possible reason be? Maybe he was, I don't know, maybe he'd had some really bad news that morning. Who knows? Maybe his wife had left him. Someone had, heaven forbid, but someone had died. And once you start moving away, 3 steps, you can do more, but 3 is usually enough. In my experience, you find that by the time you get to step 3, you're no longer in the same state that you were in step 1. Pre-step 1. You've moved to a place where really, actually, because you're considering other possibilities, that you're more willing to connect with the person. We've come back to it always, don't we really? You've almost, by hypothesizing about other possible reasons, opened yourself up empathically to that person and be willing to take on board their behavior, but not be disturbed or upset by it or thrown off kilter. And you're then able to move forward and, you know, be more productive and get somewhere, move the conversation to a good place. Well, there we are. That's something I do. Steps 1, 2, and 3. I don't know what that sounds like to you. Sound like something you might be useful for you, or indeed something you already do in your own way. Love to hear. Anyway, thanks as ever for listening. Cheers.